I've got this handy dandy guide here that has all the little things you're going to need to know about your analysis of your piece. So you're just presenting your notes. It's essentially a research paper. It's not dissimilar to my graduate research papers. This composer was born once, and their family was into music, and his dad was like a conductor or something. And then he got into the organ, and they were like, "Hey, you're pretty good at that." So then he was 20, because time flies, and then he's conducting a choir, and then he starts writing things for the piano, and then he became friends with this double bassoon player. He wrote this concerto, these three concertos for double bassoon, and then the one I'm analyzing is the second one in E double flat minor, which now I'm going to tell you all about that piece. And also the double bassoon had 5 reeds at the time. That's important because I don't, so that's difficult to play. And then you give your analysis. So if you look here, guide to style, interpretation, considerations, and then guide to analysis. It doesn't have a historical part of it, but you've got to give the history of the composer as it relates to the piece. Is the premier performance of it relevant to understanding the piece? Was it written, say, if you're a trumpet player, like two of you are, was it written for like the keyed, I don't know, E flat trumpet? Was it written for the piston or rotary valved? What kind of trumpet was it written for? Was it written in a key that has now been transposed away from because it's more playable for the B flat trumpet in this new key? Those are all important things to note. And then we talk about the piece itself. So the first thing is we want to talk about the formal design. You want to talk about this is part of a 3-movement concerto for trumpet and orchestra, and I performed it with a piano reduction of the orchestra because I couldn't afford an orchestra. And then the movement I'm analyzing is the first movement, which is sonata allegro form, or just sonata form, principal theme, contrasting theme, or A and B, and then repeat of that little section with the contrasting theme being in the key of the dominant. And then there's a development section where the keys are unstable, and there's development of both themes, and then the recapitulation, which is coming back to those 2 themes. Only the second theme is now in the tonic key, and there's no modulation, followed by a short coda or followed by a long coda. And that's the overall rundown of the form. If you want to tell us again, since we are old and we forget things, what is sonata form? Or this is the second movement because I'm lazy, and it's ternary form. So it's a original theme, contrasting theme in the key of the dominant, followed by original theme. And then you can give your rundown of what are the keys and key changes and notable cadence points, perhaps. We could also talk about harmonic rhythm if you wanted to do that, or we could also save that for when you get to the melodies part of it. But you could talk about what characterizes the theme and its contrasting theme. Because unless you're dealing with scherzo and trio or minuet and trio, there's only going to be 2 themes. With scherzo and trio, minuet and trio, there's 4. But most pieces have 2 themes. Rondo would have 3, unless you're Beethoven. So you would talk about what characterizes my opening theme versus what characterizes the contrasting theme. And you want to highlight the characteristics of them while also pointing out what is contrasting. If you say the melody is flowy with steps and the contrasting theme is flowy with steps, you haven't accurately given us a picture of why the other theme is contrasting. You can't just say the first theme's in E flat and the second theme's in A flat, because that also doesn't tell us enough. So in the case of the Hummel, that's our opening thing, and then so it starts off with lots of leaps in both directions, and it's very disconnected, and then the melody goes into more of a melodic legato and stepwise motion. You'll find those go well together. And then, so what characterizes the contrasting theme? Key change does not characterize a style. So instead of being built around just stepwise motion with legato, what I'm playing here is there's larger intervals but still legato. So it's more like it's still kind of a legato feel, but there's larger intervals being used. Chord skips is especially being used here. And then from there we go to the parallel minor of the dominant and so forth. Already, yeah, and a lot of our, that's what I'm saying, is arpeggiation of the tonic triad is happening a lot, but we're still overall legato. And the arpeggiations tends to be kind of separated. And then after that, it's all about the key changes. Then we already talked about form. I would like for you to start with form. Then the texture, melodic construction. I would reorder this personally. I would go with large into small, and then summarize with big picture again. So I would go with the form, and then the keys as they relate to the form, the primary keys. Not, we're in B flat minor now. Now we're in E flat major, and then from there, what characterizes the two melodies of the form. So we're still in form, and then from there we can go into melodic construction, the types of scales and intervals being used in the various sections based off of what melody it is that's being played. And then we can go from there to texture and harmony, because that's the accompaniment. Almost all the pieces are going to be homophonic, but what characterizes the accompaniment is their tertian, is their quartal quintal. Remember this? That was the quartal quintal stuff, Hindemith. That's not what's going on here. It's just lots and lots of chords and lots of fast scales. Rhythm and meter, anything that's interesting about the rhythm in the melody or in the accompaniment, you'll want to say at that point. So in the case of the Hummel, we could say that most of what's going on is a duple feel, but there are occasional triplets being thrown in, especially for trumpet calls or for sort of bugle calls sort of thing going on. Style interpretation. So how does this compare to other pieces from this style and this time period? How is this like the music of other composers? What was innovative about the piece for its time? We were talking about this earlier, and anything that you can put before the analysis, I would, unless it's specifically things that you have to take into consideration when you play the piece. And that I would prefer that you put after the analysis. Things that were difficult about it, or things that you had to work over. For what purpose was written, I would also put before the analysis. Maybe it's because they thought that the weird pistony redstone valve trumpet was really awesome. They wanted to write something for it. Let's see, there's different things in here. Does it reflect the influence of other composers or movements from that time period? Performance practice issues would be a big one to put at the end of the analysis. Usually it's things you had to take in consideration when performing it, not just things that made it difficult, but also things that made it difficult. Let's look at some examples of analyses that I've received from students. This analysis, while not perfect, was good enough to get a score of 100. A Bach piece in binary form, just with a short ending that's similar to the beginning. Right here, she actually gave me color coding of what each thing meant. So the pedal notes G and D let you know what key you're in. If you have a red arrow, it's just the same thing in a different key. So it could be a modulation, it could be a sequence. The ending is same as the beginning, as noted as this asterisk. She's labeled compound melodies, which happens a lot, compound melody. And then, let's see, other things. Modulations. The use of F natural means we're in A minor, because that's a common tonicization, is tonicizing scale degree 2. Secondary dominance means we are almost done. That's not a rule, that's just something that's happening here. So when we start to see the secondary dominance 5 of 5, that means that we're grounding ourselves on scale degree 5 again and heading back towards the tonic. And then the ending is almost identical, but this is inverted, going up rather than down. So that's there's a little bit of an interval inversion going on. Because what you see here is, and then there's a part later on that, so it's kind of an inversion. This is a monophonic piece, so it's really simple to give an analysis of each time the chord changes. And it also establishes harmonic rhythm, but also establishing the harmonic language. And then she's showing the shape of the melody. So then let's go to the next one. It's in ternary form. This is for choir, but you could also analyze it just as an art song. I think she analyzed it as her choir piece, and the reason is it's intended for younger choirs. So she actually made little notes in here about, like, this part of the melody is easy to sing because of the intervals. And then here it says vocal part uses mainly pentatonic scale. Here she notes that the 4 chord is only used in the what we would call the ritornellos, but we refer to it as a hoedown because it was very it's very hoedown like. And she was noting that the subdominant triad is only used in the hoedown ritornellos. Mostly 1 with 5 thrown in is once we establish the style when the melody happens. It's mostly the tonic triad, oompa oompa. And then here she notes skips and steps in the melody, which makes it very singable. Also, she notes the antecedents and the consequence. And she's color-coded everything that she thinks is important. And then here is large ensemble piece. I gave him a 90, but I gave you this example because it was color-coded. And what he did, he went into it and designated a color for each element of what's going on. This is a very complex piece. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. So he's shown me the most important instruments playing the melody, which here is oboe and solo clarinet doubled. Is a very interesting tone color. And then little counter melodies are in green. You can see there that the flute, is that flute? Yeah, it's a flute solo. It's almost a counter melody, but it catches the melody on the way down. So he's done that in green. And then over here is a little suspension sort of thing. So that's also in green. Our grounding tones, our pedal tones are in blue. And then whenever we arpeggiate, we're seeing yellow. So he felt like that was the most important elements of what was going on. And when you listen to the piece, you're able to hear all these different elements. You're able to notice these are all blue and I hear them doing very similar things. I would prefer to get kind of a harmonic analysis here. But the important thing is in your score analysis, you're able to give me enough of a harmonic analysis that I understand what's going on without being every single chord, unless it's important, unless you think that it's simple enough that you could. Yes, overanalyzed pieces would be really helpful, but mostly I want to know that if you were conducting this piece, it would sound cohesive, that you would understand what about the piece is important, what makes this piece unique, and what parts of the ensemble need to be heard over others. In what way is it important in your career to be able to analyze what you're playing? Why would it be important to say, this is a minor 5 chord with a suspension, and this is an arpeggiated tonic triad with triplets? Why is that important? Why can't I just get the music and play it? Why can't I just shape my phrases the way that my teacher taught me to? Okay, so as an educator, it's important to be able to explain the music. Okay, that's very important. Does that mean that you've got to give your students theory lessons? In what way do we explain the music to our students? And also as a soloist, how is it relevant to know what's going on in our piece? It's our job to understand and bring it to form. Yes. Form is hand in hand with analysis, and analysis is important in understanding how a piece comes together as it relates to form and melodic and harmonic construction, and it helps us understand the nuts and bolts of what makes a piece work, a specific piece, not just pieces, each specific piece. If we understand the nuts and bolts of what makes that piece itself, its own identity, then we can bring that into a performance. So it's the difference between playing everything accurately and musically versus being able to communicate to the audience the story of the piece, what am I supposed to be catching? Am I supposed to be hearing repetitions and sequences and melodic development, or am I just supposed to be hearing pretty melody? And then in the case of being an educator, I need to bring that part out. It's a counter melody. It's not the melody, but it is important because the composer put it in there for all of those two measures, and we need to hear that. And hey, that's a suspension. And if you can bring that out a little bit, and like a tension, and it's dissonant, and then release it, that'd be great, because then we can hear that. Those are little things that you can use with your theoretical training to make a piece really come alive to the listener. It's all about finding the large form and how the smaller pieces of that large form come together. So think about the smallest musical chunk, the motif, the subphrase, the phrase, the period, sometimes the sentence, and how periods tend to come together to form entire sections, and how those sections with key changes end up comprising a form. We can build our way outwards towards something cohesive in performance. We are not able to walk out and say to the audience, hey, there's two contrasting themes in a development and the two contrasting themes. Be sure you listen for that. We have to tell the story as we play.